Hello to everybody who's watching our YouTube. I am Valeri Singh. I am a therapist at Dear Oliver Therapy Services. And today I'm in conversation with Harsh Shah, who is a storyteller, a performer, and an artist. Before I even tell everybody about anything, I would like to hear it from Harsh as to how his journey has been. We are going to be discussing mental health, the stigmas, the stereotypes, and how it has been for him. So, Harsh, over to you.
Hello everyone. Hope everyone's doing fine. Hope you're doing fine, Valerie. It's nice to see you. Thank you for starting this conversation. I think it's important. I mean, anything to do with mental health, I think, is pretty important. And for me personally, I feel like I stumbled upon mental health pretty interestingly, I guess, because all of us have had a hint of watching it in movies way before we could even understand what it was. We could see a session, and I didn't even know back then there is a difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist. I thought they were, and a counselor. I thought all of them were the same. And I would look at them as the same. That hey, you go to this person and you sit in a room. Usually it's a couch. It's a very fancy couch that you could lie down on and you could like talk about your life for an hours on the go. So the idea actually weirdly stayed around, and I kind of romanticized it. It's very weird. Okay, like I come from a very different school of thought because I somehow stumbled upon it, and for some reason, I just accepted it. I never had a doubt that, oh, this is weird, this is weird. I always thought I want to be that person who sits on a couch and talks to this person. I don't know what about it was fascinating. I didn't obviously think it through in terms of what it means or what it stands for, but it was more on the lines of that I was just fascinated that, oh my, this is like really, really fun to do. And around 2017, 2016, 2017 was the time I started, or I started having conversations around. I was working in an organization called Teach for India for 2 years, and I was teaching kids then. And my manager at one of our meetings had mentioned that, hey, maybe you should, if you're feeling a certain way, because I was discussing with her how I was feeling emotionally. And she felt like maybe going to therapy would help. And she kind of just recommended it or suggested it or just in the passing had a conversation about it because she said, I also go to therapy. And, and so I started asking her what happens. And she described it to me. And it wasn't as it was romanticized in the movies. But I was like, no problem, nonetheless, I'll try going. And I found someone and I started going, and it wasn't the best experience. Because like my therapist would cancel last minute uh, and I would just like I would reach the session and she's like, oh, we can't do it today and stuff like that. So it started affecting me in some way, and then I completely went off it. But it was never like, oh, I dislike it or like, what is this? I don't want to do this again. And it's so harsh. I think it was exciting. It's just that I didn't. Both of us were probably not in the right space. I don't know about her, but I just didn't feel like I was comfortable doing what I was doing around her, whatever conversations we had. It was just very few sessions, and then I left it completely. And then 8 months later, one of my really good friends, happened to start this very small organization where she's like, I want to make mental health accessible. And that idea to me was very exciting because for 8 months, I didn't think about therapy. And then 8 months later, here's a friend of mine who's telling me that, hey, I have a therapist. She's starting out. She wants new clients. Are you interested to do it? And I said, okay, we could try. And funnily or oddly or nicely, I'm very glad also. It's been 5 years now. And with my time with break and not going to therapy and going to therapy, I'm still going to my therapist now. And I think it's been one of the most transformational things that has ever happened to me. I think it's one of the most um, empowering thing that's ever happened to me. And it's like a great celebration. Um, and I want to point this out that in 2020, at some point, my therapist was doing a check-in with me. I was not doing sessions with her, so she was like, "Let's just do a check-in. It's been a while." And our session was supposed to be an hour. It went on for an hour and a half, and out of which 45 minutes we just spent thanking each other for our existence and thanking, like, I kept telling her that, listen, without you, I really wouldn't be here. And she's like, yeah, but without you working hard, I wouldn't be here. And I'm like, no, but the point is what you did. And it kind of became a very, very fun but very emotional conversation because I was her
Hmm.
first client. And now it's been
Oh,
5 years,
wow.
and she's doing amazingly well at what she does, and she's helping out so many people in ways that I'm sure she knows and she's aware about. But that conversation really brought light into how much time I've spent with this person who I would almost see once a week. And honestly, when I started therapy, I was really excited. It was like meeting that best friend that you could just talk to, and you could have a safe space where you could just come and share whatever you could feel like. And the person will listen to you, will acknowledge you, but will also make you question. Will also, yeah, like put across questions. And earlier, the idea in my head of therapy was that, hey, we'll talk and we'll figure out the solution together. What I realized after going to therapy was that she's just going to throw questions at me, and the reflection part of it, the introspection part of it, the finding answers part of it is all inside me. And as and when session goes, you kind of figure things out along the way. So I started feeling very excited, and I was not in a very great space. Like I started realizing after going to her that I'm not in a very good space. But at that point, I would go on Thursdays. So Thursdays were the days out of like the 7 days I would look forward to in every possible capacity, just because I'm like I'm going to get to see her, and I know that I'm going to feel better after I do this, and I know that it might not clear out the thousand thoughts that I have. We might just address one, but that one also was so important in the long run. Because the things that we were dealing with then and the things we're dealing with now are so different. And like I used to think even initially that, oh, you have, because we were talking about goals and stuff in the first few sessions, and she mentioned that we have goals and we're going to achieve those goals, and in time we did achieve those goals. And I thought, okay, life is great, that's it, I just had these many things. And then like in time I said, like there's so many things to unwrap in a way, like it's like tangled earphones everywhere, and you have to untangle them little by little, but one earphone at a time. As long as it takes to untangle that one earphone, we have the time, we have the space, and that's what I've learned over a period of time. So I do come from a very different school of thought that way, but I am very glad I embraced it in the very first go, and I didn't really think much, even though I did have not so pleasant experience as my first. I still hung on to it, and I'm very grateful to myself that I did, and grateful to my therapist that therapy exists. Like it really excites me to have a conversation about this, to be a part of this, and to help myself in more ways than one. So yeah,
Thank you for sharing so much. And it is actually something which is very true, that the part that you said that the therapist also thanked you. That is actually, it made me think that yes, it is a hand-in-hand process. It's not just the therapist showing up. It's not just the client coming to the session. It is a two-way communication where communication is key. um
yeah,
but yeah, so I am glad that it's definitely, I think that's a very important takeaway also for the viewers, that it's never that one size fits all, or it's never that one therapist मतलब एक मिल गया तो अब this is going to be the only one for me. It can be it can be an
yeah,
off, unfortunately. There can be moments where you just like, no, that's not this one. And
yeah. Like I forgot also the code between the therapist and how they also take clients, because a lot of people I knew, not exactly my friends, the people I knew happened to ask contacts, and then I just knew my therapist, so I would do that. And when they would ask me how is she, I would go all out and be like, dude, she's really nice, this, that, and just be very excited to talk about her. But in 3 months' time, I realized they don't feel the same way about her. And I also made peace, and so did they, that this is not something that works out. And so did my therapist bring it up many times with me at some point, saying, listen, if you ever feel like this is not going anywhere, we can always find someone else. I will help you find someone else. We can always
hmm,
find someone else, and I can, transfer your file, transfer all the data and information I have about you to the new person, and they can carry it forward. So that space was very, very exciting, because no other industry as such has a rule like this, right? Where someone's like, oh, if this is not working out, I will help you find someone else, and I will help you make it better. Because it's okay if both of us don't feel the same way, or don't
yeah.
connect after a point, for whatever reason. So That reality check was also very important for me because I was like, oh, I feel like this about her. I'm sure everybody feels like this about her.
It's like
But then that it was a good space to realize that okay, not everyone feels like that.
And I know you said that you went in the flow, and you did not like, you're glad that you did not really have to wait for a long time, but there was definitely a time where you might be thinking, "Ki, okay, what should I do?" So would you like to share something about that? That what was that like when you had to access mental health, when you had to access that support? What was that like?
It was hard because we at the time, I think now there are a lot more conversations in terms of openly having people having conversations around like, oh, I go to therapy and I go to this kind of therapy and I do that, or maybe I'm on meds, and it's very open. But I think 4 years back it wasn't as much. So the only access we had was internet. Unfortunately, I guess, because if you don't know anything about mental health and then you start researching about it, you could find yourself in all kinds of traps. Because
Mm,
I also learned this later that if you put one symptom, it doesn't really associate to the topmost thing that comes to. It's like it's an algorithm that's fed for it to show for a certain kind of illness to show up. It's weird because, for example, like not even mental health related, but if you just type like cough or cold, that directly leads to lung cancer. That could not always be lung cancer, but yeah, that's this how the system works. So it took time for me to understand because if I was putting things that I observed about myself, I was putting that on Google search saying, oh, I feel like this, I feel like that, it would directly go and depression would show up and anxiety would show up. One schizophrenia also showed up, and then I went deep into research of schizophrenia, and then I realized I don't really associate myself with any of most of the things that were happening, except a few things like the maybe the depressive part of the anxious part. But again, I did this mistake of like reading about it and then diagnosing myself, which I realize is like it's not the way to go. And I wouldn't go around labeling it, but I was like, oh, maybe I'm depressed, maybe I don't know. And until I started doing this therapy, and I would tell her things like this, and she's like, first of all, you shouldn't self-diagnose. That's not the way to go. Second, she's like, if you at all, are in that mental space where you're like not willing to agree, and your brain just wants an answer, then she's like, here is what you need to understand: is whenever you type something, you need to have 8 out of the 10 things for you to be even closely, remotely associated with that kind of illness. And that's when I got perspective as to, oh, okay, like then when I started looking up, I was like, oh, I don't have most of these things. It's just a part of like these are just parts and bits of each other. And so at that point, it was accessible in terms of internet, but not conversations, not realistic conversations, and not how do you judge this? Like, if I didn't go to my therapist and in my head, I was like, oh, I'm this, I'm going to take measures and I'm just going to figure it out by myself, then I would be in a trap because I wouldn't know these 8 out of 10 things. I wouldn't know, like, how do you diagnose? How do you not diagnose? What do you do to actually understand it? And like a like I also figured that a therapist also can't just talk to me for 1, 2, 3 sessions and be like, oh, you are this, you are that, for sure. Like nobody knows, right? It's a process. That's why I'm still doing it after 5 years. Otherwise, like things would be simpler in that sense. Ki, haan, 3 sessions kar liya, khatam, like I'm sorted. But so I'm glad that I had the resource. And I also had friends, a few friends who were psychologists who had either
mm,
pursuing it or had already pursued. So I ended up calling them in between saying, I feel like this, I feel like this, I feel like this. And my friend only said, listen, go to a therapist. And I said, I went to a therapist, right? All this happened. She's like, fair enough. It's not a good experience, fair enough. But the point is that you still need to go. To, if not this, go to a different one.
yeah.
If not that, go to a different one. But the point is, you need to, till you find the right approach, till you find the right person that you can connect with, you have to, because it's a relationship, just like friendship. It's like the bond is pure. It's based on trust. It's
Mm,
based on the fact of how I am truly feeling and how vulnerable I can be in front of this person. Um, and even that friend told me at that point that there is no point of diagnosing by yourself because nobody, even we, she's like, even me as a therapist can't diagnose my own self. I need to go to someone else and figure that out. Which is also another exciting thing, which I was very fascinated with, that my therapist also has a therapist, and that's a very exciting
yes, it's a chain.
scheme.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a change. Like I never in my life thought this is like, it's very weird, right, to think that, oh, uh, like when you were young and someone would say a doctor goes to another doctor and you're like, that's funny. That's really
Yeah.
funny. Like I
You
just
can
don't get
just think
understand this
about it
whole point.
yourself.
But yeah, why do you're a doctor, right? So these things came into perspective. So I'm glad that I had these kind of friends. I'm glad I had these kind of people around me who kind of didn't let me go off stream. At the same time, didn't push me towards it. At the same time,
Yeah.
let me decide and give me the options and be like, here's what you can access to. And she also told me that, listen, we are related. Like I know you for a long time. So she's like, I can't really do this. Otherwise, I would have helped you in any way. But whatever I've understood so far, you should go to a therapist and figure this out. Which also gave me a nice perspective, again, perspective, help, support, where she's like, I'm here. You can talk to me. I won't do sessions, but you can
Hmm.
still talk to me about things if you want to. But you should really think of therapy as an approach to open up the conversation. And that really opened up my world. So I'm very grateful for that process and that time of what I was trying to do.
Okay. So, Harsh, you mentioned a very important point actually when you were talking about actually a lot of important points came up in my mind also. It hit me that one was of, our instinct response of, just reflex key. Okay, let's Google this. It's become so much
Yeah,
about Google that, okay, I'm feeling this way or I'm, dealing with this or anything at all. It's just Google it. And then whatever conclusion
yeah,
Google gives us, we're like, okay, this could be it. But I think that was a
yeah,
very important point that 8 out of 10 things need to match and like exactly like that, so that then you even consider that this could be something that is a
yeah. Even then, it's not sure. I
even then
feel
it's
like,
not sure. Yeah.
yeah. So I
And
think it's a
the
very,
yeah,
yeah. It's a
yeah,
very exciting thing. I think the way it was said, because like I got very fascinated when I first learned about it, about how you have to match these things and how there are tests for these things and stuff
yeah,
like that. But yeah, you were saying
yeah.
something.
Yeah, I was saying the second point which really stuck out was the fact of like, yes, you had friends, but what mattered more was that they gave you the space to decide the pace at which you want to take it forward. That
Yeah,
you having the knowledge is one thing, and then you applying it is your thing. So I think that
yeah,
was a very important point. I think all of us have that thing that, okay, I have this thing to say, I know that this will work out for you, so just do it. But
yeah,
yeah, the pace. Okay. um it did highlight one thing for me, that you spoke a lot in terms of friends and the fact
yeah.
that a lot of them were psychologists, and that helped build an understanding for you and a foundation as to how you can go about it. Would you want to share anything about family?
Yeah, actually, it's quite interesting. So I started doing therapy in 2017,
Hmm.
and it was a lot of reasons for why I did it. But I mean, it was one main reason, but then opened a chamber of secrets of literally of things that I wanted to like explore, understand. Um, I slowly like hinted to my parents that, okay, you know what, like your eldest son might be going to therapy, but it was never direct. It was like, okay, I'm seeing, I'm doing this. And then since I work in Bombay, I go home, which is Bangalore, once a few months, maybe once in 6 months, something like that. So one of those trips like that in 2018, when I had done some months of therapy by then, I happened to mention it at home. And and the conversation actually began much more earlier. It began in Bombay itself. One of the times I was coming back home and I was not feeling at my best, and I was talking to my dad, and I just happened to mention that, hey, I'm seeing a doctor. And he obviously didn't understand what seeing a doctor means. So then I had to explain in like short, because again, we were not face to face. I couldn't really explain properly to him, but I had started the conversation, so I didn't want to like now move away and make it look very suspicious. So I'll end up addressing it, saying, okay, there's something called there's someone called a therapist, and when you feel these things in life, when your emotional system is out of bounds. And for me, numbness was one of my biggest issues then. Like I just couldn't like suddenly, and I was that kid or like the person growing up that would feel things way too much. Like it's weird, but like I've been told that I was feeling too much while growing up. by like people around me, by friends and stuff like that. And also weirdly, since we're talking about this, like I went to a boys' college, so like there, uh, it is true to a lot of extent because I have cried in that college, and it's not the most comforting to cry around so many boys because boys are not so comfortable. At least the boys that were around me were not that comfortable with the idea of emotionally being vulnerable.
Mm.
And I had always seek that in my cousins or in the very strong female characters in my life who kind of opened that door for me and said, you can be vulnerable. And I saw a lot of similarities in that while growing up because um, because of how I felt emotionally and how vulnerable I would get. And I was like, oh, I can only see that in women more than I can see that in men while growing up. That kind of
Mm.
empathy that exists that
Yeah.
I don't think it didn't exist then. Um, so at that point, so I was that person who would really be so vulnerable, who would cry at a drop of a hat. If I felt bad something about something, I would cry. And I've cried in school, I've cried in college, I've cried in whatever institutes I've been in while growing up.
Mm.
So for someone like me, it was shocking that I got numb suddenly. I couldn't feel anything.
Yeah.
I don't have empathy for myself. Forget, someone else.
Mm.
I couldn't feel the same way. I couldn't react the same way. So it got too much for me. So I happened to mention it on phone for the first time. And the good part was it. I was never questioned from my dad that he obviously questioned why you're going and what happens in this and do they charge for a session? How long are the sessions? Do you take medicine or like what kind of like what works? And he obviously was confused and makes sense. Like if my generation itself is so clueless, I can expect the previous generation to not even know a word about mental health or understand mental health. So I was ready, or I was rather, I was trying to be empathetic towards them that I don't want to sound insensitive just because I know any better. Like I try to overpower that over my parents and be like, oh, you don't know any better just because you were not born in this generation, shit like that. So I was like, whatever they say, it's okay because they don't understand it either. And it was a weird time because I was going to therapy. I would tell the people I was hanging out with that I go to therapy, and some people would be like cool, some people would be like okay, some people like why, some people would get shocked saying why do you need to go, so if the people of my generation are evaluating it like that, so I can't expect my parents to suddenly be like, oh cool, amazing, wow, good for you, like go, you know but they were not of that mindset, at least saying that you like have you got mad or like what's wrong with you. They were just like okay, cool. And I was going home a month later, so I said just give me a month, you don't know what thing is, give me a month, I will come there and explain what this is. And by then I was in the thick of it and I was enjoying it so much that I would convince every single person to be like you should go for therapy. Like, and I realized by then also that you don't like the word association is also like again the same thing, or mad, crazy, like something's wrong with you, that's have to go. I feel like everyone, everyone in the world should go to therapy just for the fact that you learn so much about yourself. You will understand how to focus on yourself and other people. You'll understand the balance and the boundary and the distance and the space that you want. You'll understand this you, man. And I feel like it's very important in a time where our personalities can be on a click of a phone. An app is telling you who you are. Uh, we're so lost there that it's hard to actually look into the mirror and be like, am I this? Am I this? Am I the person on the phone? Am I the person who's interacting with my family? Am I the person who's with my friends? Who am I like, right? So, coming back, I think I've digressed too much, but coming back.
That's the best
So,
part.
well, so I came back home and I had the conversation with him. He's And ever since then, there has been a running conversation for the last few years. I
Mm.
have a younger brother. He started doing therapy a while back, and I'm really happy and proud to say that at some level, my parents have kind of known and accepted that both our sons go to therapy. They
Mm.
need help, and they are not completely convinced, but at the same time, they're not in denial. Neither are they forcing us to not do it. Every time the conversation comes up, he just says, "Okay, so what are you going for now?" And then I have to
Mm.
explain the process of what things are working and how's it going. And over time, they have learned to accept it and be okay with it. That you know what, I have a session, or every time I have a conversation with my dad of how much because the when I'm paying my therapist. All that shows up in my account. So that I had to talk to my dad about it, and I'm like, hey, I'm paying this much, and it is over time reached to a little higher value, by the end of the month. But I look at it as investment. He looks at it as like a medium for something. He knows that it's a, and initially his thing was, we're family, we're friends, right? You have all of those people. Why do you just not go talk to them? And I'm like, there is a difference between talking to people who know you, who are biased towards you, who are looking out for you, versus going to a person who completely doesn't know you, doesn't have the bias, doesn't need to have the bias in any way, and will always question you to make you think about yourself, to make you think about the actions and the measures. Not as it's very sweet. They're nice, they're looking out for you, so they're being nice to you, they're not being real. And at some level, I feel like that realness, the reality check I do get from outside. And that external space is going to therapy. Coming back and introspecting and reflecting with these people helps a lot, especially my best friend and my brother, people like this in my life who I can just talk to about these things and say that, this happened in my therapy session. This is what my therapist said. This is where it's coming from. What do you, and they also go to therapy. So there's always a cross. The language changes. The way you talk about something, the way you address yourself changes. The way you address issues, the way you address problems, roadblocks are very, very different. So I'm very, very grateful that my parents aren't born in this generation, but have really, really accounted for the growth. Didn't account for the growth, but landed up growing so much. And I'm very grateful that they are accepting of what I am and where I go, even though they don't understand it. And I think I respect that a lot because in a time like now, it's very difficult to find anyone, family also, who will not understand exactly what you're doing but still respect it and be okay about it. And now also he questions about it, sometimes, but it's never from a space of I'm trying to sabotage this, I'm trying to make you question, saying why you wasting money, things like that. It's more in the lines of like he's also trying to learn, and I think it's great for me to have that kind of support system because I am fortunate, and it does come to privilege in knowing so many of my friends and knowing from the background they come from, that it's not so easily accessible, accepted. It's not so easily spoken about because I do tell openly. We talk about like therapy at home, or it might not be getting into what happens in therapy, like what exactly I'm talking about, but it's still addressing that I have a therapist. She's a doctor. She takes care of my mind. She helps me understand myself better. Things like that. They've associated that with it. So it's honestly the greatest space I could ever ask for.
Again, like I said, a lot of like it's a very different perspective than how I have in other conversations with, say, friends or anybody I've
Yeah,
talked. And it's always come up with like, why to talk about mental health on, like in family gatherings and all, like why should we, it adds to the awkwardness and all of that. But the way you just described it, like if there is so much openness within the family structure that, you discuss, okay, this is something which came up in my therapy session, or this is how I feel about my therapist. I think it takes away from the awkwardness actually and adds a lot to it. That, okay, this is one topic that we
yeah,
probably need to expand our conversations on and really discuss. Because, like you said, you
yeah,
said very beautifully that she takes care of my mind. So, and helps you reflect, right? Like she
yeah,
questions it and coming from the perspective of genuinely wanting to understand, like, what is it? Make you think. So,
yeah,
that is
yeah.
something. Yeah. Okay, but
Like
yeah, go ahead. Can you see? Hi,
you were sorry, you were stuck. You've been stuck for like
same.
a while now. Like you were. It was jarring basically. Like you were talking, but the words were coming later. That's why I
Oh,
just stopped. I didn't. I didn't know if.
oh, for me,
Okay.
your video was frozen. Can you hear me right now?
Okay. Yes. Yes. I can. Wait. Just give me one.
Yeah, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay, cool, cool, cool. That's clear. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I
You
was
were
just
saying something.
adding to it that there was a point where like dad was just talking to me and he's like, so what, I should go to therapy. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, but I don't feel like so many, things like that. Like again, and this is initial day. So he kind of stereotyped it into that space where he's like, but I feel mentally strong. I'm like, yeah, but you would still learn about yourself. And I think you should go. And he's like, you
Hmm.
really think I should go? I said, yeah, everyone should go. And that's when he was like, okay, this makes sense. And every time we have a conversation, it's like one thing is added.
Hmm.
Last time also, literally like a few months back before I came, right now I'm with them on a holiday, but like a few weeks back, we were having this conversation on phone again about therapy and stuff, and it literally was us just throwing metaphors at each other, and that's again the relationship I share with him is we
Hmm.
talk in metaphors a lot in life's metaphors and stuff. So I was just trying to explain to him how like going to a physical doctor does you that, and going to a mental doctor does you this, and there are so many like it's this like I was drawing parallels out of it, and he found it very fascinating. So he's like, cool, whenever you're back here, when we're face to face, we'll have a proper conversation about this. And I'm like, of course, for sure, like any day, I would love to do this. So it's as exciting to do it uh, with my friends as exciting it is to do it with my parents, honestly.
Yeah. Hmm. But I'm sure you very briefly mentioned it, but it did come up in my mind that that parents or anybody from the family just coming up to you and be like, "Arey, therapist ki kya zarurat hai? Like, talk to us." So, like, that might have happened.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
were there any more like
yeah.
such stereotypes and stigmas like which became obstacles for you, maybe in your process of accessing mental health or just in the process of communicating your need to your family and friends?
Um, I think why I also started going is because I realized I'm disconnected with my friends. I couldn't really reach out to them. They were living in the same house as I was, and I
Mhm.
still couldn't tell them that I'm going through a very, very bad time and I'm just not able to cope with it. And I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to process it. I don't know any of it. And I knew that they don't have solutions. And I knew one thing that if I have to talk to them, I have to repeatedly talk about this, and I don't even want to talk about this right now. So it was a bunch of a lot of things that I was kind of dealing with. So I knew that going to someone like a therapist would really, really help in that moment. So I just went with it. And because I enjoyed it so much, it didn't bother me. But yeah, like a lot of people would question saying, why do you need to go? Like, ऐसा क्या हो गया life में कि मतलब जाने की जरूरत पड़ गई? And things like that. And at that point, there was a very massive, uh, like a like a black hole sucking all the emotions out of me in a way, and I had to go address it at that point. So it was very uh, uh, in that context, yeah, it was a little hard because like I didn't expect it from people of our generation. I didn't expect them to question it in a way that sounds like you are not neither on this side, neither that side about it. It's like you're saying कि अच्छा क्यों जा रहे हो, but it's not coming from a space of empathy. It didn't come, at least for me, from those couple of people or a bunch of people, small group of people who were treated from interest state. It didn't come from a space of empathy that, oh, why do you need to go? It was more like, why do you need to go? Like what's so wrong? Like ऐसा क्या हो गया लाइफ में, ठीक तो है, you're working, you're earning, you're living in Bombay, you're living the life, why do you need to go? And that troubled me a lot, quite honestly, for a while, because I couldn't find the answer to explain. And like for a while, I felt like I owe them an answer, which again I don't. But at that point, initially it kind of did affect me, or but it didn't affect me in a way that I thought of leaving therapy because I was like, oh, what will they think of me? But it was more in the lines of like, how can I start a conversation which in response will not be like, oh, I know this. I know that. I know the therapist does this. I don't have any problems in my life. I don't want to go. Like and also to explain to people that life isn't black and white. It's not so easy to just be like, oh, problem or solution. Like I wish it was that simple,
Yeah.
but it isn't. And I've made peace at some level that it isn't. So at that point, I think those were, yes. And also, like, there were some tragic moments. I feel that's a little gender, like throwing light on the gender
Mm-hmm.
part of it, that there were some incidents that had happened that I would go talk to people about, and they would be like, "Oh, but you're a man, this can't happen to you." And I'm like, "That's not like it's okay if you have a disbelief that uh, a man could also go through something." Um, but like I feel everyone has an equal space to feel all kinds of things, um, and at that point I felt very belittled in terms of like, oh, am I like, is my gender the reason? Like, am I supposed to feel things according to my gender? Am I supposed to react according to my gender? Like, is this what it has come to? Um, because if I mentioned something of a sort, um, uh, on the lines of harassment, people would just be like, no, you're a man. Obviously, it not happened to you. And some people have gone to the extent of saying, yeah, but men are doing it. So what are you complaining about? And I'm just like, but I'm a different person. I can go through different things. Someone else could have done something with me. Like, and it's weird that I would have to convince them. I'm telling them a story, like something that must have happened, and they're just like, no, this can't happen. And I'm like, I'm not here to make you believe if it happened or not. I'm just telling you that it happened. And a lot of people wouldn't believe it then. So I became a little indifferent for a while because I got very annoyed that this was thrown at me. And this was thrown at me from every person possible then. I'm not trying to throw it like a certain gender or some certain person did it. It was all kinds of people who did it at that point who looked at it as a very gender thing and said, no, but this
Mm-hmm.
can't happen to a man. Like, what's wrong with you? So I got tired of convincing people first because I don't know why I felt the need to convince them that, oh, this is real and this can happen. Then I got very indifferent towards them. Then I stopped bringing this up because I didn't want to listen because I got tired of being like, dude, I have been fighting that battle, and it's happened to me, and I don't need to prove it to you, and I don't need to make you believe that it's happened with me. But I stopped telling people about it. I would address it in therapy, but I would not address it to people saying, "Oh, this happens to me also." Especially when the conversations like that would come up, saying, "Oh, men go through things like that." I would just not say anything because I'm like, dude, if I get into this, either I will break or I will reach a very not a good comfortable zone with the person because then we'll get into specifics and I feel like I first of all I like it's weird, right? Like it's your life. Why do
Yeah,
you need to convince someone else if something happened or didn't happen? Like it's very weird. And also for them to be in disbelief कि नहीं हो सकता है. And I'm like, why will I make this up? Like it's so
exactly.
weird. Why will I just sit down, write a story and be like, oh, by the way, this also happened to me. So I think those were major. Like,
Mm.
luckily for me, family was never an aspect because I somehow have learned over a period of time to not care enough about these external opinions. So
External.
for me, it was like my parents are okay, I'm cool.
Mm.
If it's anyone from extended family, I'm like, if you know me, if you've seen my life, then I'll respect your opinion. If you're just anyone who just
Mm.
has been a part of my family and my life, and suddenly he'll come one day and be like, oh, you don't need this, you don't need that. They didn't know any, like they didn't know because all of this we wouldn't discuss with them because I had my safe space. I didn't need to discuss it outside. Cousins are different. I'm just saying like the external family and stuff. I didn't need to explain my side to them or talk to them about this, so it never came up. So I always had this support at home, but I would always get shocked outside home. It was the other way around for me. You know, like people around me were being
Mm.
weird. People in my house were being okay and normal and being like, yeah, okay, whatever happens, it happens. Um, Taking time to understand and learning. Part of the process is to learn and unlearn in therapy, but same thing is around you, right? So that part was very difficult. That whole
Mm.
period is very difficult in terms of trying to do this. And over a period of time, now I've become very indifferent to these opinions because I'm like, "Okay, I don't need to prove to anyone what happened, what didn't happen. It's okay. The world is the way it is, and uh, everyone is not on an equal level of feeling all good things or like going through things. Like everyone goes through things, and it's a part of process. And I don't question it, nor do I do anything around it. I just let it be. And I think now it's become better in terms of
Mm.
mental health and things going around. I know so many of my friends, and again, I feel like being in the entertainment industry or being an artist, seeing so many artists do this, make therapy a part of stuff they
Mm.
do, create things around therapy, create conversations around that, just go to therapy and mention it, even like
Mm.
casually to people that, I do this and, it's really helped me. has changed a lot of things because now people are openly talking about it. There is no, I mean, I don't think gender was such a big issue, but there is no even issue on any aspect related to gender, related to any other point itself to even start and be like नहीं ये नहीं हो सकता जो भी वैसा conversations ही नहीं हो रहा है like that's gone,
Hmm.
that's way beyond. uh, it's growing, it's definitely growing, it's a different space. You can talk openly about things now, and uh, the awareness over time has made a great deal out of it, the openness towards a lot of things right now, I think. So
Hmm.
I'm glad that things are happening right now.
First things first, thank you for sharing all of this because it can't be easy because you're talking about your journey not just with accessing mental health but also what led you to reaching out to accessing it in the first place, to say the least. So it can't be easy, and you're saying that yes, now it is easier to like sort of maybe ignore or just
Yeah,
sideline the uh, whatever the comments which are being made, or the remarks which might be getting thrown towards you. But your what it seems like to me is that the initial time when you tried to open up about what was going on, what was kind of seems like bringing you down, you must have opened up to people whom you were trusting. You had an expectation that yes,
yeah,
this person will understand, this is a safe space, but that seemed to
yeah,
have kind of in some ways tumbled down for you. So I'm sorry that you had to
yeah.
go through
Thank you for empathizing.
that.
I think it's okay. It's a part of the process
Mhm.
again to understand things better.
Yeah. Definitely. And honestly, I really feel, I know it's like mid conversation, but I need to just say this that your everything that you're sharing and the way you're putting it, I think it will be a lot for the viewers also to understand better about how to access and how to even,
Yeah,
how we receive any conversation when somebody is opening up to us and sharing what they're going through. And the point that you made about gender,
yeah,
Harsh, I really don't think that there's any conversation that can go around without gender being a part of it, because and there's no way we can
yeah.
talk about mental health and not get the difference in between. It's
That's
it,
there.
yeah,
That's definitely there. Somehow it's a part of it.
unfortunate. But
Yeah.
okay, that leads me to the next part of our conversation, which I'm very happy to begin. And that is what led you to moving towards storytelling and your podcast and all of those things. How did you decide to open up to in that uh, online platform? Not just online. I think you're even offline. You're doing the
Okay.
talks.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a very interesting space, and there was no point. There was no proper point, or I was like, oh, I'll start talking about it now.
Yeah.
I would literally just find anyone who goes to therapy and feels as excited as me, and I'll just talk to them about it. Like, like Deepika is this friend that we both met. She works at Dear Oliver, and we would have conversations where we would literally call each other up if we cried in session and just be excited about it. Like I would call and be like, dude, I cried today. We would just celebrate it. And I really, really like look forward to that. Every time something great happened in therapy, I just had these people, like therapy friends of sorts who I would call and just be like, oh, today, you know what? Like I remember one day my therapist in a very long time, maybe the first time ever, she's like, I'm really proud of you. And I screenshot that and I sent it to like six people and I'm like, dude, my therapist just said that to me. Oh my God. Like I'm losing it. Okay. So and they understood it. Like they were those kind of people who enjoyed therapy as much as I did, enjoy talking about therapy as much as I did. And the best part was we never told each other why we were there. We never told each other what we are working on. But we constantly give each other updates on breakthrough, like the big breakthrough of like, hey, this happened, or like, hey, I cried because I was numb, right? So like for me, the first time I actually cried in a long time in a therapy session was like, wow. And while I was crying, while I finished crying, while I was leaving therapy, I was waiting to like just open my phone and tell all of these like therapy friends to be like, guys, this was amazing. Like, wow, like I did this. And I think these things are very important. Very
Hmm.
like I to think crime should be way more normalized than it already is, because I think
Mm.
that has helped me. At least for me, it's helped me a lot. And I know that I just observe, because I should teach children also, that crying is a great way to cope. And the day you stop crying, the part of your coping mechanism kind of has to find a new way. And I don't know if there's a new way as an adult, to
Yeah.
express. That's me again. Um, so stage
Mm.
just so there's no time like that. Where I was like, okay, I'll stick to talking about this. I started putting stories up on Instagram after my therapy session and all. I didn't do it for a very long time, but I did it as much as I could. Where I would write about what I learned today, or what are the key points he's told me that are a little more generic, that could be put out in the world, and probably anyone reading it could use help out of that. So I did that for a while, every now and then, and it was really nice because people would respond and the conversation would begin about something, and it was always nice to uh, understand perspective from their side, because it was always me and my therapist talking to each other, so we both know each other's perspective, and then someone else comes in and adds a new
Yeah.
like a branch into the tree, and you're like, wow, okay, this also exists. And I didn't know this exists, but excuse me, I'm glad that it does.
Yeah.
So then I started realizing कि यार मेरे जैसे बहुत लोग हैं. uh, तो stage पे here and there I would like draw hints about this. There were a lot of my poems or stories then that were associated with the fact that he went to therapy and my therapist said this and this is what came out of it, and that's what led me to write this. So those kind of conversations were happening. Then I did this campaign called 100 Bad Days on Instagram in 2019. Around that time, I was doing stuff on stage, but not very actively. Like I would talk about encounters with my therapist, but they were not very like I would say structured. They were very impromptu. उस time पे हम बात कर रहे थे. I was hosting an event, spoke about therapy. I'm like, okay, I'll talk about this and I'll go into it. So it's not a more conscious decision. Nowadays, I'm trying to create a more conscious decision towards creating content or writing stories from my life in such a way that it can highlight the aspects of therapy or therapy itself. But yeah, 2019, I did this campaign called 100 Bad Days on Instagram, and it was inspired by a song from a band named AJR. The song is
Mm.
also called 100 Bad Days.
Mm.
And the hook line is 100 bad days makes 100 good stories, and 100
Mm.
good stories makes me interesting at parties. And then, I just thought so much about this, and I did a small show, where I spoke about this, and I said, hey, it's really cool that when we go on a bad date, when we have a bad encounter, that moment is very intense. But 2 years from then, you're laughing. You're really laughing at something that you thought you were like the one of the most intense moments of your life. Um, and I think it's nice to celebrate that you have bad days, because if I didn't have bad days, I wouldn't account and value my good days, and also wouldn't learn, and I also wouldn't cherish this point. And yeah, like honestly, these are the best stories. I've heard good stories, okay, but good stories are good feel. But bad day stories are so cathartic, are beautiful. To like share it with a room full of people who've all gone through bad days. Everyone goes through bad days. So it began there. And so what I did was that from 1st of June 2019 till about 8th of September, I every day wrote about one story, one of my bad days and what I learned out of it. And I did that for 100 days. And that's where I stepped into the space of vulnerability online, where I was
Mm.
like, okay, I'm going to talk about real things. I'm going to talk about my life. And right now, also, fortunately, my entire life is displayed on
Mm.
over those 100 posts on Instagram
Yeah.
with whatever happened in my life. All of them are true. And even in that period, when I was talking about therapy, when I was talking about therapists, when I was talking about mental health, and like indirectly, not directly mental health, but the struggles I went through while growing up. Um, I didn't understand the meaning of vulnerability because I was just sharing. Like I didn't really look into it. And then people would always be like, dude, it's very brave you're doing this. It's very amazing you're doing this. And I never understood. I was like, what's brave in this? I don't know what's brave in this. And then I brought it up in front of my friends and they had to explain that, dude, you, just because just because as in like it's easy for you. It's easy for you to share and be vulnerable. It's not as easy for a lot of people. um, and that's when like I got thinking, and then I was like, okay, you know what? The conversation has to be started again. Like because
Mm.
people need to come and talk about this, even if you're not completely sure of where you are, or even comfortable for that matter. I'm sure there are ways to get you to be comfortable to talk about this. So the whole, like, I was in shock that whole time because one of the things I kept receiving was, "Oh, you're consistent. Oh, you're how you doing this? How you managing to talk about these things out there to everyone in the
Mm,
world?" Um, and the question of vulnerability, and also the uh, the acceptance of bad days. I think for me, ever since that point, every time I had a bad day, I would always think in the aspect of, oh, what better can come out of this? I'm sure
mm,
something better. If not something better, I will have a great story to tell on stage. Like at the end of it, something's going to work out essentially for this.
yeah.
So the conversation began there online, and then eventually started pushing it on stage as much as I could around people, with people, in small rooms, in small spaces. Um, Wherever I could drive the conversation for therapy, I would drive it. Wherever I could see an opportunity where I could talk about my therapist, talk about my experience, I would talk about it. Because I've also realized that once you're vulnerable, like um, the campaign that I did, two other people
Mm,
after that landed with the same campaign. So I realized, okay, like if you are being vulnerable, someone's going to get inspired to be vulnerable. I didn't think of it like that, but it turned out like that. And
mm,
same with stage. Like I kept doing these stories so that I was like, कल उठ के कोई और इवेंट में जाएगा तो they will
they will be able to
feel the
share.
need to talk about this. They will not
Mm,
think like you can't talk about this on
yeah.
stage. You shouldn't address this. These are all like very hush hush topics that you should never address, never talk about. But I've also been lucky that way because I've had friends who've been very vulnerable and real with me. Like I've had friends who were on meds for a while, like medicines for a while, and they were seeing psychiatrists and they were seeing therapists, and we would all have conversations. Like every week, I'd meet my friends from performance. These are all performance space people who I've known for the last 5 years. I would literally meet them and be like, "So what's going on?" And they'd be like, recently I had therapy session." I'm like, "Me too." They're like, "Okay, great." I'm like, "So what's going on?" They're like, "I'm on meds." "Okay, what are meds for?" "My meds are for this." Then we, have a conversation around it. So there was always openness towards it. It was like, how casually it would be if two friends met and spoke about like, "Oh, you went to office?" "Oh, yeah, I went to office." "So what do you do in office?" "Oh, I worked on this project." "What project?" "Oh, this." It's literally like that, except you're really talking about your stuff and you're like, and obviously like I didn't know much about medicine, so I would talk to my friends and ask them in detail, saying, "What do you
Mm,
feel when you take this medicines? How does it affect your mood? How does it affect your body? How does it affect different things?" And even I learned how these medicines affect your mood and your different actions in life. So it was all of these things helped me create a good space, safe, healthy, nice, interactive space where I could talk about anything to do with mental health, anything to do with therapy, anything to do with this. And people didn't seem weird, were not taken back, were not being like, "Shit, kya bol diya isne, ऐसा नहीं बोलना चाहिए था," or something like that. And also kudos to a lot of people in the last few years who've been organizing a lot of events around mental health. Like I've seen
mm,
a lot of open mics, I've seen a lot of storytelling sessions, I've seen a lot of poetry sessions in and around mental health, and that's beautiful. That's amazing that we have come such a long way that we're talking about it on stage with strangers, and it's a safe space where we can come and talk about it. There have been people creating such spaces, so now kudos to them. Kudos to people who are also promoting therapy, and also finally, I mean, to therapists itself, and you and the organizations like Dear Audible, like the one that my therapist goes to. I feel like all of these organizations who are pushing mental health and pushing boundaries to have conversations about this and also making it accessible. I feel like
yeah.
earlier people used to feel like it's not accessible. There's obviously different resources. There was free therapy 10 years back also, and there's free therapy now also. It's just that
Yeah.
the way, the standard, the way it
Mm,
works, and the information around it isn't very accessible. Right now it is. And in the lockdown also, I feel it was great that there were resources being passed around. There were like Excel sheets with like numbers of therapists with how much they charge, and a
yeah.
lot of them were doing it for free, even though they didn't have to because it's also their job essentially. Um, Anymore because it was amazing to see so many therapists being accessible and also providing therapy for free in whatever capacity they could, whether in group or in individual sessions. But the fact that they took that effort, because that Excel sheet that I saw, like I was already going to therapy with my therapist, but I was just fascinated at what's been going out there in the world, and I happened to see that Excel sheet, and there were so many numbers. There were like 700 numbers in that. which were a mix of people who were doing therapy for free, people who were doing therapy for minimal price, people who were doing therapy on budget, people who were doing therapy at their normal cost.
Mm.
And that speaks a lot for where we were in terms of conversations, in terms of openness the last 4 or 5 years. And it's 4 or 5 years only. And 4 or 5 years is not a very long time, I would say, in that context, about this, because I mean, therapy has been existing for as long as
Mm.
as long as you've known text or understood things. But the fact that it came so late, and the fact that it turned around, it turned a lot of things around, and people were sharing these kind of resources at that point, and I know it helped a lot of people, and a lot of
Mm.
people did seek it in whatever capacity they could, and it really helped them in that context. So it's nice the place we've reached to have these kind of conversations. Because essentially, you wouldn't want to be isolated in any scenario,
Yeah.
because I don't think that brings out the best in us. So when you start showing and showing people that how therapy is a space to connect, to bring warmth, and in a way to again connect to yourself, uh, and also to do it together. Um, and it's not an isolating process. You may
Mm.
feel isolated. It's not
Yes.
an isolating process.
Mm.
And the fact that it gives you reassurance to get back on your feet and navigate your way in through this garden in your head, which is filled with all kinds of plants and filled with all kinds of fruits and all kinds of clouds of thoughts
Definitely. Yeah.
of yeah. So it gives you a nice. It's a good. It's a very calming, relaxing voice somewhere in the back of your head who is working with you in your voice and is supporting you through this process. So I'm again very grateful and glad that we've reached a point where we can have this conversation. And even for this conversation right now, that we have a space where we can,
Yeah.
start have a conversation like this.
We've definitely come a huge way, and even it's we've also, all of us have actually observed as to how talking about these things in any which way seemed very tough a situation. And
Yeah.
that's my question also, that how did you decide to open up on a bigger platform, so to say, where there were people who were watching you and commenting also, and maybe like to a lot of extent. And I'm very happy to hear that people showed you that, okay, this is a very courageous thing that you're doing, you're talking about it. And for you to have that intention behind you, that if I'm doing it, maybe somebody watching it might be able to do might be able to share it with lesser feeling of
Yeah.
I don't know, I mean, maybe uh, I'll leave that up to
Again, less a feeling of isolation, like
yeah,
not wanting
isolation.
to be felt alone,
Yeah, I
because
won't
essentially
be
the
understood.
minute
Yeah.
you feel like we're in this together, and every time, like I don't know, every time in shows I've done, at some point if I do end up saying we're in this together, I have
Mm.
goosebumps, I feel emotional, and I know the energy in the room. Everyone is feeling like, yeah, um, we're going through a very difficult periods of time. Everyone has a difficult life. I don't
Mm.
believe anyone has got it like the easiest way. There are easier ways, there are not, like whatever. That depends on how your life has turned out to be. But
Yeah.
I just feel like everyone's life has problems. Everyone has so much going on in their lives, and like a little bit of a mm, like a little bit of uh, it's like saying that you're swimming in a pool where it's higher than your height. Like your height is, maybe you're like, I'm 6 feet, and like there are pools that are like 8 feet or 10 feet. And, and if I'm in water, like till 6 feet, I can walk.
Mm.
But I know if someone's around me, I can take that extra leap and be like, okay, I'll go to like a little bit, I'll touch
Mm.
7 feet, like I know someone's
Mm.
going to be around to like see, someone's there to protect me, someone's here to like looking out for me. It's the same thing. Like you're just too deep in water to try to understand that it's just a moment, a phase, and sometimes our brain, visually shows us things that might not particularly be true, or like it just shows you a path where you feel like, oh, I'm alone, like I don't
Yeah.
have anyone in the world, and you're already isolated, then you're away from reality, and then you're not in the space to work with yourself because there's no connection. So this is just a way, having conversation in a way to is to tell someone that, hey, we're in this together. It's okay. We might not be on the same level of intensity. We might not feel the same things, but I know, and I know that we're in this together. and that's what matters the most, more than anything else at this moment. So yeah,
I think I want to end this entire conversation on this note that I've watched a couple of your podcasts and your the videos that you've put up on Instagram. Rather, I've watched those more. I think it has helped in building a connectivity, and that the entire isolation aspect that you are highlighting, it lessens it so much that it builds a lot of relatability, and like, yes, we are, like you said, that we are in this together. And it was a
yeah,
very nice analogy of the swimming pool, by the way. But yeah, it that is what these things do, like the conversations that we have, the discussions, and just opening up. And yeah,
yeah,
I'm also on the same page as you, that I'm very thankful for the space that we have,
yeah.
we have, and we can have conversations about this. So yeah.
Yes, I'm glad to, and I'm grateful. And whoever's watching this, wherever you are,
Yeah.
I hope that this conversation has eased in for you, and I hope that you feel more. If you didn't feel a little comfortable earlier, maybe feel a little more comfortable towards therapy, and I hope you seek it in any form someday. And also, there are so many kinds of therapy that I also didn't know about. Like if you do feel like talking is not the only way, there's art therapy, there's movement therapy, there's different things you can try out according to what you feel you're comfortable doing. But the idea is to seek help for yourself,
Yeah.
by yourself, so that you can just have a even more enriching and fulfilling experience of life. And uh, yeah, cherish moments that are coming in whatever way they come. You have the strength to go on. uh, yeah.
Yeah. And than everything that Harsh has said, I will again like to re-emphasize on the major point of pace that he made. That the pace, like the process of you accessing mental health is important. So is your pace that you choose to decide. You choose that, okay, this is how I want to go about it. But definitely having all the information
Yeah.
before you take it forward, that is also very relevant. And for that, all the mental health professionals are right here. Yeah. Harsh, any ending comments?
Um, like I said, all have it tough. We're all going through a lot of things. Um, the best way is to help each other, is to be human. Um, to be human is to feel things, is to experience life at its fullest, is to seek help when you are deep down in the trenches, when you know that you are alone and um, you don't feel so good about yourself. And I'm sure, like in the world that we're living in, and also social media and stuff, it's more often than not. Like earlier, it was more related to your growth and stuff like that. Now it's become like very small. Like small things can trigger us to feel very little about ourselves
Mm.
because of the world we live in and how it's divided. But all I would like to say is that there are enough resources out there for whatever you're going through to seek support in any form that you want to. Um, so if you feel like it's too much to reach out to a stranger, reach out to a friend to begin with. Reach out to those friends who will help you get perspective, not question your life. Because I've questioned my life a lot. When I start questioning it with the approach of um, interrogation, nothing good comes out because I'm not trusting myself. I am putting myself on a space like a court, and I'm asking questions saying, "Why do you feel this way?" Instead of being like, after going to therapy, my answer would be that I feel this way,
Mm.
but where do I think the feeling is coming from? Where do I think I can address it better, help myself? So the idea is to just get help in whatever way possible. And it might not seem the best thing to do, or in terms of like, it might not seem like, oh, getting help is the best thing, or I'm an adult and I can figure it life by myself. It's great, but it's just adding to your whole experience of life. I feel like it's better to live it and be fulfilled by it in every capacity than to have just parts of it. And I've had experience of whole life, and I've lived for many years now. I've lived half parts here and there, and I would choose living life every day with feelings, everything as much as I could, and trying to learn, unlearn, heal. Uh, But the process, the first step is to just acknowledge that you want help in any way. And yeah, there are enough resources, there are enough spaces to help you out. Um, so yeah, it's all out there. Just breathe, look out for someone you trust and let them know that you need help. And I'm sure they'll be there for you and be there to help you in any way possible.
I think you've very beautifully wrapped it all up. And this is exactly what I was also feeling, that
I'm glad.
yeah, reaching out is the first step and it's very tough. But once you do it, I won't say it becomes all the more like merrier and easier, no. But it is the first step. And yeah, like Harsh said, somebody will be
Yeah,
there. So,
yeah.
thank you so much, Harsh, for sparing so much of your time for this. And we will be putting up all the details relevant with regards to Harsh and us in the comments below. And yeah, you can always access this these resources. So, thank you for watching, and
Yes.
bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you guys, whoever's watching. Thank you so much.
Yeah, bye.